What's up, creators? It's your boy, Mad Mike, and on today's episode, I'm going to share with you guys my story on how I acquired my 1974 Plymouth Barracuda. Let's just get right into it. I'm just your average hardworking blue-collar guy, 37 years old, with the dream of owning the ultimate muscle car, which is the Plymouth CUDA. And behind me, you can see my 1974 Plymouth CUDA, which I now own. So let me get into the backstory on how I acquired it and how I basically brought it into fruition. It's a pretty crazy story. Never thought in a million years that it was going to happen, but it has happened, and we're in the midst of building the car right now. So let's just dive into the story and I'll kind of tell you how it all came about. Like I said before, my name is Mad Mike. I have this YouTube channel where I build creative custom cars. I've had a love for cars my entire life. I've always been into fabricating, building, doing fiberglass repair, and doing the more styling of the cars and aesthetics of the cars. I was never really into the mechanical side of things, which I'm into now, but at the start of my whole car journey, I've always been into aesthetics. And the CUDA has always been the sexiest, coolest looking car, I think, in the world, next to the Ferrari F40. But the CUDA, since a kid, was the ultimate car that I could own. Growing up, I had a lot of cars. I worked on a lot of cars. I had a car shop when I was 19 years old, installing body kits and kind of doing custom body work. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but I quickly learned and picked up skills. So over the past 10 years, I've been living out in Squamish, BC. So it's on the west coast of Canada. It's beautiful. I had a great time snowboarding, snowmobiling, and just having a blast out there. But the one thing I was lacking was a workspace. So while I was living out in BC, I was trying to build cars on the side. I was building cars out of a barn that I rented at one point in time. I was building cars underneath the carports while it was pouring rain, and just outside in the elements. Rent out west was crazy expensive. I couldn't afford a big workshop out there, so I just kind of did what I could with what I had. And at that time, it was working in carports. And while I was building cars out west, I was flipping cars to try to raise some capital to be able to buy, you know, something pretty cool. And when I was searching for cars, this one time I came across a 1974 Dodge Charger. It was a 440 big block car, numbers matching, white interior, vinyl top car, and I picked it up for $1,000 off this old guy that was just getting rid of all his project cars. You heard me, I got it for $1,000, a 1974 Charger 440, and it had the build sheet in the back seat still. It was, I think, the second owner. So while I was building that car, life kind of got in the way, things happened, and I unfortunately ended up having to sell the car. I made a little bit of money when I sold it. I sold it, I think, for like $4,300 to some guys that said that they're gonna rebuild it, but they got a steal of a deal. I got the car running, it sounded monstrous. I didn't know at the time what I had, but now that's one of those cars that I wish I'd never sold, but hey, life happens. So from there, I started buying more cars. I bought some Porsche Boxsters, and I bought a 1978 Pontiac Firebird with a 400 big block. I just kept buying cars and flipping cars. I was buying dirt bikes at the time and flipping dirt bikes, just trying to raise up capital to be able to buy, you know, a CUDA. So at that time, I was doing a lot of snowboarding and snowmobiling, and one day I took my buddy Trevor and his girlfriend Bailey out sledding to do some snowboarding in the backcountry, and that was a mistake. So on that day, I got in a bad snowmobile accident. I broke my elbow in like 10 places. I fractured my pelvis in 2 places, and I was in the hospital for over 2 weeks, and it was a long recovery. And the crappiest part about that whole situation was I borrowed my friend Alistair's snowmobile to take them out that day, and I ruined it. He just picked up the snowmobile and I destroyed it. The thing was a complete write-off, so we tried to part it out, and that's where all my capital from flipping these cars went. I had to pay my friend Alistair back, even though he said, "Don't worry about it, dude, it's all good." He is honestly one of the nicest guys I could have in my life at that time, and still to this day. But Al was so nice, and he was really good about the whole deal. And while I was sitting in the hospital bed looking at ways to raise some capital to be able to pay Alistair back, I came across an ad for a 1973 CUDA. You heard me, guys. It was down in Vancouver. The guy was asking, I think, like $7,300, and it was in rough shape from what I could see in the pictures. But I'm sitting there in the hospital bed staring at this car going, man, if I could pick up that car, maybe fix it up a bit, I could do a quick flip and be able to pay Alistair back for wrecking his snowmobile, and it'd be fun to wrench on a CUDA. Obviously I'd love to keep it, but at that time I was thinking about how I could pay my friend back. So I went down when I got out of the hospital, and I walked up to the guy's place. Well, I didn't walk up, I limped up on my cane, and I met the guy, looked over the CUDA, and it was actually in a lot better shape than what the pictures showed. He had a storage shed beside the house with a rally hood, full interior, you name it. He had everything for it except for the motor. So it was a rolling chassis, complete interior, but it had a lot of rust in the floorboards and it had a big dent in the roof. But you know what, for $7,300, it wasn't a bad deal. I didn't have that kind of money. So I talked him down. I told him my story about how I've always dreamed of having a Plymouth CUDA. And you know what, after talking with the guy, he said, well, make me an offer. And I said, would you take $3,000 for the car? He said, yeah, I could do $3,000. And I said, okay. Problem was, I didn't have $3,000 at the time, guys. I didn't have anything. Long story short, I contacted the guy the following weekend and asked him if there's any way that he could hold the car and if I could make payments. He said, unfortunately, the car sold. So I had the opportunity to buy this 1973 CUDA for $3,000, and I missed it. I can't believe it. Oh man, I'm kicking myself now that I couldn't find some way to raise the money. But hey, everything happens for a reason, and that specific CUDA just wasn't meant to be for me. So I left it in God's hands, and you know, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. If you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand, and I just try to hold that thought in my mind all the time. All my wallpapers and backdrops on my computers and cell phone were pictures of CUDAs at the time. I just kept picturing it and envisioning myself driving it and watching YouTube videos of, you know, the cars revving and just driving down the street and just getting in my mind, you know, that one day I would have a CUDA. I was super bummed that I couldn't acquire this CUDA, but hey, that's life, things happen. So fast forwarding, some time went by and I was able to acquire some money by flipping some dirt bikes and doing some other things to pay my friend Alistair back. And I just had this idea of starting a YouTube channel. From watching all these car videos like Daily Driven Exotics and all these muscle car YouTubers, I kept watching these videos being like, damn, I could do that. Growing up, I always edited videos and was filming, and with my love of building cars, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to just dive right into YouTube and try starting my own channel. So I started Mad Creative and I started building custom cars. And I didn't have a car at the time, so I started looking around and I came across a Ferrari kit car based on a Pontiac Fiero. So I said, man, I gotta have some really creative content on the channel. So I ended up picking up this Ferrari kit car, and that's what kicked off the whole Mad Creative YouTube channel. And here we are today, but to get to this point, I had to make some big decisions. While I was starting my YouTube channel, I was building cars underneath a carport. I was renting a basement apartment, and it was really hard to do, I won't lie. It was tough, you know, we had a lot of snow in Squamish, we had a lot of rain in Squamish, and I was building a car out of a carport. I didn't have my welder, I didn't have, you know, a shop with all my tools laid out. I had a little garden shed beside the shop where I would kind of store all my tools, but that's the way it is. I kept grinding at the YouTube channel, and I had to make a hard decision. I knew I needed a workshop, so I said, you know what, my brother's living in my old house, and we built a big workshop, which is this right here. We call it the Mad Lab, and right there and then I knew I had to make a tough decision to move back to Ontario. So that's what we did. I drove across the country with my dad. We hauled the kit car across the country, and I started to build the car in the shop here, and I needed to get a job. So I started looking for a job once I got back here, and I ended up landing a position at a restoration shop, Radical Rods, Rides and Restorations, which I'm super stoked and blessed to have got. It was pretty tough at that time because it was COVID, and I was really lucky to land a job at this shop. So I'm working on these muscle cars, you know, I'm a fabricator, that's what I do. So I was, you know, working on these muscle cars, and the whole time I was just like, damn, I'm kind of sick and tired of working on my Pontiac Fiero and building, you know, fiberglass kit cars. I'm building another kit car for my dad. It's a Ferrari 355. I'll show you guys an image or a video right here somewhere. But yeah, I was building this one for my dad, and I'm building the Ferrari Coney kit car for myself. And I was just bored of it. I'm like, man, I want a muscle car. And at that time, I was like, yeah, I'd love to have a CUDA, but I thought there's no way in hell I'd be able to afford a CUDA. So working at the hot rod shop doing restorations, I started getting inspired, and I knew I wanted another muscle car. Fast forward again to April 25th. It's now my birthday, and I said to my girlfriend, I want to buy a muscle car. We started to look on Facebook Marketplace, see what we could find, and I came across a 1976 Chevy El Camino, also known as a GMC Sprint. We went up, had a look at it on my birthday, and I bought it for $1,000. Brought the car home, and I was stoked. And I was like, yay, I got a muscle car. With my YouTube channel, Mad Creative, I knew I had to do something creative for this build. So I had the idea of putting a Plymouth CUDA front end onto the El Camino and calling it the El CUDA, because I love CUDAs and I knew I couldn't afford a CUDA. So I said, you know what, let's build this car into something pretty unique. It's never been done, and we'll build a truck CUDA, call it the El CUDA. So I dove right into the project, got rid of the kit car, pulled it out of the shop, and I started acquiring parts for the CUDA front end. I started to buy some fenders, a rally hood, I bought a CUDA grill out of a 73, headlight bezels, the entire front clip from a CUDA. I just kept piecing it together. And while I was out and about meeting all these people, buying these parts, I started to meet a lot of other Mopar guys, and they had their CUDAs, and I was just drooling over them, being like, damn dude, that's a nice car. And in my head, I just kept dreaming, you know, it'd be a dream to one day own, you know, a CUDA like you have. But here I am building an El Camino into a CUDA, and I thought that's what I was gonna do, and that's what I was doing. So we kept doing the build, and you know, posting videos to YouTube on the El CUDA. I was having fun with the project. We got the whole front clip mounted to the car, and it was looking awesome. I was so excited on this build. It actually looked like a CUDA from the front end when you look at it, and then when you go to the side you see the truck bed. It's pretty cool. So we have an event just down the street here in Oro, which is called the Burles Creek Automotive Flea Market. And at this automotive flea market, they have so many car parts and cars, and it is a dream place to go if you need anything. Motors, transmissions, grills, headlights, you name it. They got everything there. So my girlfriend and I, we go to the Burles Creek Automotive Flea Market, and we're looking for parts that we can add to the Project El CUDA. And I came across this one guy. His name's Ward, and he was selling a ton of CUDA parts. He had doors, he had taillights, you name it. So I started talking with the guy, seeing what he had, and I saw these taillights on his counter, and I was like, damn, those would be awesome to do a conversion on the back of the El Camino, so I could have the front end on the El CUDA as well as the rear end. I wasn't planning on it, but when I saw the taillights, I was like, those taillights would be awesome. I could get a tail pan and do a CUDA conversion on the back of the El CUDA. So I started talking with Ward, and he gave me a price on the lights, which was $200, and that's an honest price. These lights for a CUDA aren't cheap, and they're hard to come by, especially in the condition that these lights were in. But I didn't have $200. I didn't feel like it was worth spending $200 on these taillights. So I said, well, what else do you got? So I asked him what else he had for CUDAs, and he showed me an emblem. He had a Barracuda emblem. And I'm like, oh, that'd be perfect. I'll buy the emblem, put it on the back of the El CUDA. It'll be a nice little touch. How much do you want for this emblem? $20. I said, deal. Handed the guy $20, and I walked away with the Barracuda emblem. So a little bit after the Burles Creek Automotive Flea Market, I got a message on Facebook. I totally forgot, but I posted an ad a long time ago on Facebook Marketplace that I was looking for a CUDA, and if anybody had any leads, to let me know. And I got a message from this guy saying, hey, I know where there's a big block 440 1973 CUDA for sale if you're interested. Guy left me his number. I gave him a call. We talked about the car for a bit. It was one of his neighbors, and the guy said he was willing to sell the car finally, and he wanted 10 grand for it. And I thought, what do you mean, 10 grand for a 1973 440 big block car? It didn't make sense to me, but kept talking with the guy, and we made arrangements to go look at the car. My girlfriend and I, we planned a trip. It's out on this island in Ontario called Manitoulin Island. It's about a 5-hour drive from where I am. So it was a big drive, but it was well worth the drive to go try to see, if we could potentially pick up this CUDA. So my girlfriend and I, we planned a trip to go to Manitoulin Island the following week to go look at the car. And because it's such a far drive, we decided to make a camping trip out of it and a mini vacation. It was summertime, it was nice out, and we said, heck, let's go check out this car and we'll see if maybe we can make a deal on it. So the week leading up to making the trip out to the island, I called the guy on Thursday and said, hey, are we still good to go? Is the guy still gonna be around, to sell the CUDA? What's the deal? And he gave me the news. He said, dude, I'm sorry to tell you, but the CUDA's not for sale anymore. The guy doesn't want to sell it. I was so bummed. The guy sent me photos of the car, and it was like, had the hood scoop I liked on it. I liked the patina, the wheels, everything about it. The car was complete, and it was sitting there, and I'm like, man, are you kidding me? 10 grand for this CUDA? And you got me all pumped up, and now it's not available for sale? I was really bummed. My girlfriend was bummed too, because we planned this trip. She doesn't get a lot of time off. She's a hard worker, and we were really looking forward just to have a nice weekend. We decided to go to the island anyways, and the guy said, you know what? I have a couple of CUDAs myself. If you want to come up and have a look. They were out of my price range, but I said, yeah, you know what? We're still gonna make the trip out to the island because we took the time off, and we might as well go stop in at his place to have a look at his cars and just kind of get inspired, right? During the week, I actually started, Google Earthing and doing some detective work trying to find out where this CUDA was for sale. And sure enough, while I was doing the street view, just going down the street on Google Earth, I saw the CUDA in the back of this guy's yard. I found out the address. I wrote down all my information on a piece of paper, my name, my number, my email, and a nice little note saying, hey, if you ever want to sell this car, please contact me. I'll restore it, I'll come out, I'll give you guys drives in it, etc., etc. And I even laminated this note. And my idea was, when we go to visit this gentleman on the island and have a look at his cars, I was gonna stop by and potentially just drop the note off at the CUDA that wasn't for sale anymore. And if those guys ever decided to sell the car, they had my information. Fast forward again, we're making the trip out to the island. We are excited. On the way up, we actually saw a yellow CUDA at this random house. So I took a couple of pictures of this yellow CUDA, continue to make the trip up to the island. 5 hours later, we get to the island, and we're driving up to the address of the car that was no longer for sale. And sure enough, there the car was in the back weeds. And luckily for me, there was somebody outside. So I hopped out of the car and kind of walked up to the house, a little bit sketched out. These guys looked a little bit shady, and I'm 5 hours away on an island, and I don't know who these people are or if they're gonna be happy with me just walking up to them. And I just started talking to them about the CUDA. I gave them all the information and said, hey, if you ever want to sell the car, here's my laminated piece of paper, let me know. Hop back in the truck, and we're making the drive down to the gentleman's house who had the other CUDAs. And at the time, I was working at a restoration shop, and we were looking for a 70 CUDA that a client was looking for to do a resto mod build. So, I kind of wanted to look at these cars that the gentleman had for sale, even if they're out of my price range, for my boss, because if we could pick one up for a resto mod for one of the clients that we had, that would be great. So I'm pulling up to the driveway to meet this guy and see all of his cars, and sure enough, he's got, I think, 3 CUDAs in the yard and another CUDA that I'll tell you about in a second inside of his shop, tucked away. So I pull up in the driveway, get out, I meet the guy, and you guys won't believe it. This was the same guy that I met at the automotive flea market a couple weeks prior. His name is Ward, super nice guy, and I just couldn't believe that it was him. He was the guy selling all the CUDA parts at the automotive flea market, and now here I am out on the island, and he contacted me over Facebook, not even knowing that, I was the guy that met him at Burroughs Creek Automotive Flea Market, but he was the one that contacted me saying that he knew a guy that had a car for sale. And here I am at his house looking at his CUDAs. So we're walking around checking out all of his CUDAs. He's got, I think, 270s, and he brought us into his shop and showed us this other one in another room, which I believe is a 70 or 71 convertible CUDA. This car was so sick. It's been hanging up in a body shop, I think he said, for like 20 years or something. Long story short, he wanted to buy this convertible CUDA, and in order to buy this convertible CUDA off this old gentleman, he had to buy all the CUDAs that the guy had. He had an old drag car shell CUDA, he had a 70 CUDA, and I think another 70 CUDA, which was more complete. All the other CUDAs that he had were pretty rusted out, but there were 70 CUDAs, and I think he was asking like 10 grand for one of the shells. We're checking out his cars, walking around his property, and then over in the corner, I see a front clip. It was a fiberglass front clip off of a CUDA drag car, and I said, hey, that'd be kind of cool to use for maybe the El CUDA build that we're doing, and maybe I could sell off all the metal fenders I had and just put that fiberglass front clip onto the El CUDA. And he said, yeah, I got no use for that fiberglass front clip. If you want it, make me an offer. Started looking at the front clip, and then I looked over to my right and I saw the shell of a 1974 Plymouth CUDA. It was rough, right? And I looked at the shell and I said, what are you doing with that shell? And he said, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. And I said, man, this would be great. I could cut the roof off and I could graft the whole roof of that 74 CUDA onto the El Camino and have the back glass and still have the truck bed, and that way I'd have the whole window line of the CUDA on the El CUDA build. And I went around at the back of the shell of the car, and the taillight panel was in still pretty good shape too. So I said, man, I could graft on the roof, I could graft on the taillight panel to the CUDA, that would be perfect. So we started to talk about that car, and I asked him if he'd be willing to sell the shell of the CUDA. And he said, yeah, I don't know, like, what are you gonna do with it? And he was all skeptical about me maybe cutting up the car and grafting it onto the El CUDA, but he's very interested in the project that I was doing. And he said, yeah, you know what? That'd be kind of cool if you did that. He thought that the car was too far gone to rebuild, and I did too. Everything was rotted out. The car was sitting on the frame rails. It had a 7 1/4 rear end, which wasn't even bolted in. It was just sitting in there, just I guess so you could drag it around with the side-by-side to move the car around. But this car looked far gone, so he had no problem with me cutting the car up, and I had no problem with wanting to cut the car up too to graft onto my El Camino El CUDA build. Long story short, guys, we made a deal on that CUDA. I got it for an incredible price. He threw in some gauges, he threw in some taillights. Oh, and you guys won't believe what happened. So remember I was telling you when I was at the automotive flea market that I was looking at these taillights that he was selling for 200 bucks? Well, when we made the deal on the CUDA shell and the front clip, he threw in the gauges for me, and he also threw in those taillights that I wanted to buy. I can't believe it. Yeah, the taillights that I wanted to buy at the car show were out of this shell, and he just gave them to me when we made the deal on the shell of the car and the front clip. I was stoked, man. I owned a CUDA shell, are you kidding me? I was so excited. I can't believe that I owned this CUDA shell. It wasn't a full CUDA, but hell, I owned a CUDA. So I was so blown away that one, this guy, Ward, was the same guy from the automotive flea market, and that I got those taillights from him. He just threw them into the deal. I have a fiberglass front clip that I could use on the El Camino, and my girlfriend and I, we had a great trip that weekend. It's a week later, I arranged the car trailer, and my girlfriend and I made the second trip out to the island. We drove another 10-hour round trip, and we get out to his property, we load up the CUDA, and after we load up the CUDA, he wanted to give us a tour of his property. So we hopped in his side-by-side, and he's kind of showing us all the old maple syrup stuff that they used to do out there. And he had a wicked property, and we're driving around his property on a side-by-side, and he's got a bunch of metal junk out in the forest. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, what's all that stuff out there? He's like, oh, it's just all junk. I'm like, can I just take a quick look at it? So my girlfriend and I, we hop out of the side-by-side, we're rummaging around through all this metal junk, and I see these doors there. I go, hey, what are you doing with these doors? He goes, oh, they're all rotted out, they're junk. If you want them, you can have them. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I could use them for patch panels. I think I got like 2 Challenger doors, and one CUDA door. And while I'm digging through all the kind of metal junk, I came across these aluminum pieces, and I'm looking at them. I go, man, these look familiar. They're all bent up. Sure enough, they're the sill boards for the CUDA or Challengers. And I said, what do you do with these, Ward? He said, if you want them, you can have them. He knew what they were, but they're all beat up. And I knew that I could probably straighten them out because I'm a fabricator, and I could straighten them out and polish them up and get them to be good again. So I was stoked on that. I got some spare parts. I got these CUDA sill plates for the doors. And yeah, we loaded up the car on the trailer, had a great time out on the island, and we hauled the car back home. We're unloading the car and we're kind of checking it out, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, man, this car really isn't that bad shape. The floorboards were actually in pretty decent condition. It had front glass, it had back glass, it didn't have doors, it didn't have a trunk lid, it had nothing. It had no K-member, it had zero stuff. And I started digging around. I found the last 6 digits of the serial number on the cowl. The VIN number was gone, unfortunately. Ward did have the doors, but he wanted a little bit of money for them, which I couldn't afford at the time. So I got him to take some pictures of the VIN number. It wasn't coming up, but we were able to get the VIN. I was able to figure out if I could get the ownership for the car. And at that point, looking at the car, I said, you know what? It would be a damn shame to cut up this CUDA and graft it onto the El Camino. So that's when we had to make the decision. Do we want to make the El CUDA build and cut this CUDA shell all up for the El Camino, or do we want to try to rebuild the CUDA? And I asked my girlfriend, and I made a video and I posted it to YouTube, and I got a bunch of comments, and everybody said, you know what? It'd be a shame if you cut that shell up. And I agreed with them. So that's when we decided to build the CUDA. Yes, sirree, Bob. That's the story of how I acquired my 1974 Plymouth Barracuda. And one other thing, guys, you won't believe this. So remember how I told you that I was at the automotive flea market and I met Ward, and I decided not to buy the taillights or any of the parts off of them, but I was able to buy that emblem? Well, get this, guys. How crazy is this? So I grabbed that emblem, the Barracuda emblem. I go to the back of the shell that I just bought, the 74 Barracuda, and sure enough, what's there? The outline of Barracuda. I grabbed the emblem, I put it up, it's an exact match. And that's what he told me. He said that emblem is off that car. So without me even knowing it, while I was building the El CUDA looking for parts, I buy this emblem, the Barracuda emblem, off this guy Ward, which later I buy a CUDA shell off of, and that emblem and taillights that I wanted to buy were from that car. Talk about law of attraction, guys. I am a strong believer in that. Call me crazy, but you know, crystal power, whatever you want. Like, I wish I would hold this crystal every night, just wishing, you know, for a CUDA in my life, wishing for my dream house, my dream girlfriend, you know, to make millions off YouTube and all this stuff, and it's all starting to come to fruition. You just gotta believe it. Small steps though, guys, and this CUDA is just proof that, you know, manifesting, you know, and law of attraction is a real thing. You just gotta believe in it. Sure, you're gonna get down at times, but you gotta just believe in what you want and imagine it. You know, just envision yourself in that dream car, in that dream house, and that's what I'm doing. One step at a time. We're gonna build up this YouTube channel. We're gonna build this CUDA with a 440 big block out of a motorhome that we're putting in it. We're gonna have my dream house with my girlfriend in our dream Mad Lab, this big workshop. It's all gonna happen in time. But I'm happy with where I am right now, but I'm a strong believer in law of attraction, guys, and this is proof of that. So that's the story of how I acquired my 1974 Plymouth Barracuda. We got the car rolling now. It's got wheels, it's got a K-member in it, it's got a full interior, it's got a 440 big block out of a motorhome that we're gonna be putting in it. So definitely make sure to follow this journey, guys. It's gonna be a hell of a trip. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next time. Ciao, ciao.